Early signs that this Omicron wave is now here and spreading in the United States. Fox News addressing those text messages sent to Mark Meadows, who could now face criminal charges for defying that January 6th subpoena. And can Spider-Man save the box office? It's looking like he actually might. Wednesday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning, everybody. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for December 15th. I am Carlo Versano here with Baker Machado. 10 days until Christmas. How is that possible?
Yes. Move up the Advent calendar, Carlo. Good Wednesday morning to you. Happy National Cupcake Day to our listeners on this day. I love me a good cupcake because it's the perfect portion of not too much, not too little, but right down the middle. It's the Goldilocks of desserts.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, I guess. I'm more of a cake guy, but anything cake adjacent, I stand for. By the way, before we start, I caught up with our friend Wags last night.
Jill Wagner. How's she doing?
Jill Wags. She's doing good. I was just, talking shop with her. She wanted me to thank everybody who sent her such kind messages, wishing her well over the last couple weeks. She's really, really touched by that. But she's doing good. And she, the one thing that she said is that she's listening to the pod, and she says that we're going too long, so that we have to reel it in. And so we can't upset Mom, Baker.
No. Whenever the parents complain. Yes, whenever the parents start to complain, we have to basically taper things. So, okay, we will, again, try to be on our best behavior today. We will try as humanly possible to keep it as brief as possible. So I guess, having said that, I guess let's dive into the headlines. Okay, so the CDC, Carlo, warning that Omicron cases starting to spread rapidly in the U.S. and that the country could see peak of wave infections as soon as January. Omicron now accounts for 3% of nationwide positive tests. That's up from 0.4% just a week ago. The surge clearly already underway here in the New York tri-state area, which is detecting the variant at 4 times the national rate. And new cases also starting to impact pro sports once again. The NHL, NFL, NBA, all experiencing outbreaks that are depleting their rosters already. If you just look, and this is according to the New York Times this morning, Carlo, in regions of New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, the percentage of Omicron infections has now reached 13.1%. And a lot of epidemiologists are compared to what's happening with the United States to Denmark in particular, just because of the rate of vaccinations and all of that. In Denmark, they're seeing an almost daily doubling of the amount of new COVID infections that are part of the Omicron variant, which is leading a lot of doctors to basically speculate here we might see multiple waves, not just in January and the winter seasons, but also potentially another one maybe in the spring as well.
Yeah, it could be actually good if the first parts of this wave start to hit New York, especially New York City, because we're like something like 90% vaccinated here.
It's pretty high.
So if we can get through it, I think that's a good sign that well-vaccinated places will be able to handle this. 75 player positives in the NFL over the last 2 days. By the way, that's not a good sign. It's also happening in the NBA. I'm going to the Nets game on Saturday. I don't even know if they're going to be able to play. There's 7 players on that team out on the COVID protocol. And I was out in Manhattan yesterday, and I noticed that the lines at the testing sites were quite long. Once again, starting to look like they did really a year ago, which is not a great sign. And I don't know if you saw this. This one just blew my top yesterday. Not to be outdone by Middlebury, Cornell University now going fully remote for the rest of the semester. They're tracking a new COVID outbreak there. All school activities banned, as if Ithaca wasn't depressing enough. It was a place to live. I kid. I'm just mad because I didn't get into Cornell. Actually, I did get in on. I got in deferred, but whatever. Cornell sucks. Anyway, the school says that. What an obnoxious thing to say, right?
No,
anyway,
but I love it. I love the bitterness never ends. I'm the same with all the colleges that didn't accept me also.
Yeah. But seriously, though, the school in their release saying that being vaccinated with a booster is, quote, not a license to let down our guard, end quote. Isn't it? Isn't that the whole point, actually, to be able to let down your guard once you're fully vaccinated? I mean, this is I don't want to go back on a whole tangent about this because we talked about it last week, but There's no wonder that there's still so much vaccine hesitancy out there. Why bother getting vaccinated if you can't let your guard down when you see stuff like this? It's just, if we keep going by case numbers, we've said this before, but it's just never going to end, right? Because nobody has told us what is the threshold for normalcy. That's the question I want to ask Fauci, Biden, anybody with any sort of power in the public health apparatus. What is the threshold for normalcy? They say at Cornell the cases are rising at a, quote, concerning rate. Well, okay, what makes the rate concerning? Is it 10 cases? Is it 100 cases? Is it 500 cases? Is it one hospitalization? I mean, these kids up there, they should be banging down the door at the registrar's office asking for a refund. $60,000 a year to go to these schools, and they can't even get through a semester without shutting down. By the way, this isn't happening in the SEC. None of the big state schools in the South are dealing with this. They're getting through just fine. They're going to football games. They're going to classes. I mean, if you have half of your college experience ruined because of a virus that you're vaccinated against and that honestly isn't really that big of a threat to you and your cohort to begin with. I know that this is not an especially popular position to hold, probably especially among our audience. And some people will say, as they have to me, hey, look, it's just a couple of weeks. It's the end of the semester anyway. Better to err on the side of caution and not send a bunch of infected students back home. I just don't agree with that. And I never have ever since the widespread availability of effective vaccines. Life has to be lived. It's simple as that.
Well, to answer, I think, your original question, I think your thesis is correct in the sense of how do we sort of judge what's sort of the barometer of normalcy. And some epidemiologists have said it's actually going to be the death number. Not so much the case number, it's going to be the death number, because especially what we've seen with Omicron now, breakthrough infections are happening at a much higher pace than what we saw during Delta. So the likelihood, I think what was a 79% chance based on Danish data, that those who were vaccinated are still catching COVID because of the Omicron variant. So the likelihood of us catching COVID from this is high, but the chances of you dying are exceedingly low if you're vaccinated, and especially if you're boosted, your chances of death and hospitalization is incredibly low. So to answer your question, we know this is going to get into the endemic phase of the pandemic soon, so the death number might likely be the more logical barometer in terms of gauging whether or not we're back to normal or not here.
But I mean, in a bad flu season, you could have 1,000 Americans dying a day of the flu, and nobody cares. I mean, I shouldn't say nobody cares, but it doesn't affect public policy. It doesn't close colleges. It doesn't change the way we live our lives.
And I want to just, before we move on to the next one, say something with the Colorado governor, Jared Polis, who, by the way, one of the more popular governors in the country, has an approval rating over 60%. He has done insane, crazy vaccination sites throughout the entire state of Colorado, and he is now saying, look, if you are not vaccinated and we're not going to implement mask mandates across the state anymore, we are not going to do vaccine mandates either, but if you catch COVID, that's your fault. That is your responsibility. We did our job to make sure that you were prepared, and basically moving on from here, this is under your guise and your recommendation from here on out, because we did our job to make sure that you were safe and protected, and everything now is kind of just left up to you now.
Yeah, I mean, before we move on, I mean, I think that that's sort of generally where I'm starting to feel on this thing. I think it's just the last thing I'll say is, the goalposts have been moved on this since the beginning. In the beginning of the pandemic. Now. Yeah, if you remember the beginning of this, it was all about flattening the curve, right? We had to buy hospitals time so that they didn't overload, and I think everybody was down with that, right? Nobody wanted to see, people in hospital beds out on the street and in those, refrigerated trucks and tents outside hospitals. So we all did our jobs, but hospitals aren't overflowing in a lot of places. So maybe in places where they are, those areas require some level of extra, regulations and rules. But generally speaking, it's just what is the goalpost? What are we trying to do? The virus is not going to go away. We're all going to be exposed to Omicron or Delta or Zeta, Eta, Theta, whatever the next variant is. It's incumbent upon us to have all of the tools in our toolbox to make sure that if and when we get sick, it's not that bad. Can we move on?
Well, one of the tools potentially to be added into the toolbox to help against this will be Pfizer's new COVID antiviral pill. It appears, Carlo, to be holding up well in trials, including against the Omicron variant. Based on new data released by the company, when taken within just a few days of symptoms, the drug reduces the risk of hospitalization and death by close to 90% among high-risk patients. That would be consistent with earlier data, and it shows better results than Merck's competing antiviral, which I think was falling in the 50% in terms of how much you were being protected. Now, the FDA has not scheduled a meeting to consider an emergency approval of the Pfizer pill. It's called Paxlovid, but if they did get this approved, you could potentially see this, a lot of people being able to take this potentially before the end of the year here. I think the United States has actually paid for about 10 million doses, for 10 million Americans, to get this pill, which would no doubt be significant here. Just another tool added to the box here.
Yeah, and a good one. But what's the rush, right? FDA. I mean, if this drug is as good as they say it is, I don't know why the FDA isn't getting it out ASAP, right? Pfizer even said that they halted the clinical trials because it wouldn't be ethical to continue them when it appeared that this pill was as effective as it appears to be. And now it's just like sitting in this regulatory purgatory. So I think that, yes, the sooner they can get this on the market, the better. We're not going to have enough of it in the beginning, but it's something.
But to something we've also said before with the amount of people who are not getting the vaccine or are vaccine hesitant or choose not to get it, there are some people out there, the Joe Rogan group of people that are taking this weird horse tranquilizer or horse dewormer that would rather not take a vaccine but would take an antiviral pill.
Yes,
so so for those who are not getting the vaccine, does this entice them maybe to take something like this, which would also bring down the cases as well? All right, let's move now to Washington. The drama continues to heat up there, Carlo. The Justice Department now going to be tasked with deciding whether or not to pursue criminal charges against a former White House chief of staff. My gosh, that's still a statement I can't even believe I'm reading. That after the January 6th House committee voted to recommend holding Mark Meadows in contempt, two Republicans, Representative Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, voted with Democrats. Republicans unanimously, except for those two, voted against it. Meadows' cell phone is becoming a core pillar of the investigation into the Capitol riot. That after the committee revealed text messages that he received from Republican members of Congress and Fox News personalities who implored him to get President Trump to condemn the attack as it was happening on January the 6th.
Both Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham. What's her? Ingram. Anyway, they both addressed those texts on their shows on Fox last night. It was pretty predictable. They blamed the committee for releasing them. It was like an invasion of privacy. And, of course, when in doubt, they blamed the media for reporting on them, even though, of course, my favorite thing ever is when Fox News blames the media. It's like, what do you think you are exactly? You're
Good point.
Right? Geraldo, he was even on Hannity last night. It's kind of like the voice of reason.
The mustache man, yes.
Yeah, Hannity basically shut him down. I mean, look, if any other news organization was dealing with something like this, it would be the absolute end of their credibility. It doesn't matter an ounce to Fox. It doesn't matter to their viewers. And look, I know that MSNBC and even CNN are essentially an arm of the DNC at this point. But, Fox is a very different thing. They literally they despise their audience, right? They do. I mean, they think their viewers are the dumbest rubes in America. And it's the way that they treat them, and it's just incredible. If you watch MSNBC or CNN, you will accidentally be exposed to views other than your own over the course of the day. That doesn't happen on Fox. Fox is straight party line, state TV when the Republicans in power, and straight opposition when they're out of power. Simple as that.
Yeah, no, really interesting. And I was actually, they had not, nobody on Fox had even discussed the Mark Meadows situation all day yesterday until Sean Hannity basically was tossing his show over to Laura Ingraham. So it had been almost a full 30 hours yesterday before Fox News even acknowledged the fact that their two most high, next to Tucker Carlson, some of their most high-profile stars are being basically ensnared in this giant controversy on the Capitol. And I thought it was also really interesting because Mitch McConnell was asked about this yesterday, and he seemed incredibly intrigued with what was happening on the House side of the investigation. And he said he is watching all of this incredibly closely for all the other sort of revelations, basically implying that some sort of traditional establishment Republicans were also just as taken back by those text message revelations regarding Mark Meadows here. Meanwhile, let's move to overseas now, Carlo. At least 62 people were killed and dozens more injured. That when a gasoline tanker exploded in Haiti's second largest city of Cap Haitian. The tanker had broken down and was leaking gas, and people had gathered around the truck to collect fuel when the explosion had happened. Haiti in the midst of a crippling gas shortage, just one of several ongoing catastrophes that seem to happen in that country all the time, Carlo.
Yeah, especially over this last year, the government of Haiti still reeling, of course, from the assassination of its former president. The government there basically losing control of that country as we speak to the gangs. One of those gangs is still holding a dozen American missionaries hostage. 5 of those 17 missionaries have been released. The FBI apparently has not had any luck with the rest. That includes children. So that's a story that I just want to keep an eye on because, I mean, these are American citizens and, they're being held against their will in a country that's not that far away from our shores. The New York Times also on the Haiti beat reporting this week that the assassinated president, Jovenel Moise, was about to name names when he was killed. He had a list of drug traffickers and was reportedly about to go on an anti-drug crusade when he was assassinated in his home last summer. I mean, Haiti, I've said it before, it's like the unluckiest country in the Western Hemisphere, right?
They're still recovering from that earthquake that was, years ago. Haven't been able to basically get back up on their feet on that.
And there was another one this summer.
I know. It's just, it breaks your heart, Carlo. Let's move to entertainment, Carlo. James Bond couldn't do it. Steven Spielberg couldn't do it either. But now it's Spidey's turn in an attempt to rescue the movie theater industry. SpiderMan No Way Home tracking to break every COVID-era box office record, possibly by a lot when it opens wide this Friday. The latest installment in the MCU featuring Tom Holland in his third solo outing as the superhero, getting some pretty good reviews also. It right now has about a 97% score on Rotten Tomatoes straight out of the gate. Look, estimates are it potentially would crack over the $100 million mark, which we have not seen any film during the pandemic get there. Black Widow and Shang-Chi, which were sort of the two big sort of movies that actually did well during the pandemic, got in the 80 million range in their first opening weekend, and those were considered big successes here. So if Spider-Man gets anything over 80 million, it's clearly a huge success for Sony here.
Some of these box office trackers have this film going as high as 200 million this weekend. That'd be huge. No movie has cracked 100 million since the start of the pandemic, and it looks like Spidey's going to be the one to break the curse. So, I mean, of course, it's always superhero movies, right? Are these movies any good? I like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans, but I haven't really been up to speed on the Peter Parker.
You didn't watch the Andrew Garfield one?
I don't think so. No, he wasn't very good, though, was he?
So the rumor is, and again, no spoilers here because I haven't seen anything or read any of the spoilers since now more people have been able to see this. But Tom Holland has sort of been indicating Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire might make cameo appearances in this film as well because they're bringing back almost all the villains from previous Spider-Man iterations, which is why a lot of people are really into this. Also, Zendaya is in this, and I don't know if you saw her outfit on the red carpet the other night for the premiere. I was like in love with her dress. Her dress was so good.
I like her.
Yeah, she's awesome, and I'm such a fan of hers. But she wore almost like this Catwoman mask on the red carpet to the Spider-Man premiere, and I was just like gaga over it.
She's dating Tom Holland, right?
Yes,
in real
she
life?
is. Isn't that so interesting that you have the two stars of the film that are actually dating in real life? You never get that opportunity very often.
And I did like that Tom Holland came out and was like, he was like, people who say that I shouldn't be able to date her because she's taller than me, that's BS. It's like, okay, there we go, short king. It's okay to be short.
I'm trying to think. And our listeners can correct me if I'm wrong. The last one I can think of is Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart, sort of the 1-2 punch of a big superhero, fantasy movie that the two stars were dating in real life off screen also, which was interesting.
Yeah. Send us the other ones if you know
if you know any. I can't think of any.
We'll call it. Okay, let's do a little more to know before we go, Baker.
Yeah, President Biden going to get a first-hand look at the devastation from last weekend's tornado outbreak. POTUS going to travel to the towns of Mayfield and Dawson Springs. Those are two of the hardest hit areas. 100 people still unaccounted for in that state, Carlo.
I put a great link to a video in the newsletter today of this guy, this Kentucky man who it's incredible. His sister took a video of him without his knowledge of him playing a gospel hymn on his broken piano in his house, which was basically destroyed by the tornado. There was no roof. It was just a really, really touching moment. And I think you see so many of those in the aftermath of these kinds of stories, these kinds of disasters that hit these little communities so hard. So anyway, check that out if you haven't yet. It's in the newsletter this morning. Meantime, one other note out of Washington today: the U.S. will avert a credit default after Congress passed a $2.5 trillion extension to the debt ceiling. They did that hours before a key default deadline there. So this will take us through the midterms until 2023 before we have to worry about this again. So no showdown over the debt limit in an election year, which is
exactly.
I think, a good thing for everybody.
Yes, and Republicans calling this a win because they're basically got Democrats to vote on a party line, on the party line to basically own the debt. So you're definitely going to hear Republicans start to talk about that with the midterms on the horizon here. Andrew Cuomo has been ordered to return $5 million in proceeds from his cursed COVID memoir on leadership. New York State's Ethics Committee voted to claw back that money that Cuomo made from that book, though it's legally a questionable order here. Andrew Cuomo is saying he's going to appeal this. He says he has no intentions on paying that money back.
I mean, this is legally questionable. I think absolutely. I don't think they can do that, can they? I mean, it's.
I don't know. Great question.
It's another political hit job, I think. But anyway, a new eye drop that could replace reading glasses for millions of people who suffer from nearsightedness is now on the market. It's a big deal. Vuity, it's called. It's now available with the prescription. It's a once-a-day treatment that can help you see up close without affecting your long-range vision, which of course is an issue, especially as you get older. So no more reading. If you don't like your reading glasses, if you lose them all the time, you can now have this eye drop on you, and that should keep you going for the whole day. One drop in each eye provides sharper vision for up to 10 hours.
Wow, putting readers out of business. This is big news here, Carlo. Meanwhile, Ben Affleck back in the news. That after he opened up to Howard Stern in an interview saying he was deeply unhappy in his marriage to Jennifer Garner and that he probably would still be drinking if he stayed married to the actress. But look how happy he is right now. I saw him on the red carpet the other day with J-Lo. Seems to be living the best life right now.
Oh, is there anything grosser than talking about your divorce, your ex, like in the media?
Oh yeah.
And what did she ever do to him? I mean,
she's so
sounds like
amazing.
She dodged a bullet.
No, she did. She absolutely did. He was kind of a hot mess, and so no, she's so lovely, and I'm such a big fan of hers also.
Yeah. And I mean, she was like taking him to rehab after they were divorced, and then he's out there like spilling the tea on their marriage. One
thing I used to, when I lived in Los Angeles, the person that used to do my eyebrows, also did Jennifer Garner's. So I always, every time I was getting my eyebrows done, tried to get gossip about Jennifer Garner, but alas, did not get anything exciting.
Dare I ask, what does that mean to get your eyebrows done? As a man.
Oh, it's great. Oh, it's good. They basically have this brush. They pull it up and they kind of snip off all the excess hair that you basically have. They kind of just clean it up just a little bit. But other than that, you spend $100 for something that takes 2 minutes.
You do have very nice eyebrows.
Have
you been told that before?
It is the gateway to the soul, is what they say.
Okay, anyway, Jill, you're listening. You're shaking your head right now. I know. Finally, just a big milestone in sports last night. Steph Curry is now, statistically speaking, the greatest shooter in NBA history.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
The Warriors superstar drained his 2,974th three-ball of his career at Madison Square Garden last night. It was against the Knicks, of course, which lost. With that three-pointer, Curry passed Ray Allen for the record, and he did it in 500 fewer games. Curry has really changed the NBA, and you forget, Baker, when we were growing up in the 90s, basketball games were completely, they don't look anything like they look now, right?
No, it's like street ball, which is amazing. Like, what he's able to do is incredible. And also the Warriors, who struggled mightily last year, the #1 team by a moonshot in the Western Conference right now, and it's because of how good Steph Curry has been this year.
It's crazy. All these old guys keeping basically the NBA afloat here.
True.
Okay, well, I think we stayed relatively
I think we did
tight
good today.
Okay, good. Good on you, Baker. Good on me. That's for you, Jill. Okay, folks, that's what you need to know for Wednesday, December 15th. We'll see you tomorrow.